Hi, everybody. My name is Steffen Lange, and I'm very happy to give you an input at the ICT4S 2021. I don't know whether I've been introduced already, so I will shortly do it myself. As I said, my name is Steffen Lange. I work at the Institute for Ecological Economy Research, and I'm also associated scholar at the Humboldt University in Berlin. I've been working on digitalization and sustainability for about 5 years now, in particular as part of being the co-leader of a junior research group, that's what it's called, on digitalization and sustainability. And apart from digitalization aspects, I work a lot on, I come from ecological economics, so I work a lot on post-growth, on question of degrowth, growth independence, on rebound effects, and also on digitalization in agriculture. So that may be on my background. I will share a presentation with you. So the topic I've been asked to fill is economics and sustainability, of course, in the light of ICT developments. And I'm happy to do so. And I will focus, as you will see in a minute, on the relationship between digitalization of the economy and energy consumption and CO2 emissions. So I focus on energy consumption and climate change in my talk. Sorry. Okay. As an introductory aspect, I want to point out my motivation to work on digitalization and sustainability from an ecological economics perspective. That's where I come from. And the motivation is that the digital transformation and the sustainability transformation are two transformations that are very important in our time. So, for example, the president of the European Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, she pointed out that digitalization and climate change are the two most important aspects of her presidency. That was about 3 years ago. So this is not only my analysis, it's also the analysis of many politicians, of many scientists, that these are two fundamental transformations. And I think it's particularly interesting to analyze them at the same time, because the digital transformation is happening, and we can discuss how important it is, but it is certainly happening. And it changes economic, how economic actors act. It changes how markets are being organized. It changes a lot of things. I'll come back to that in a minute. And the sustainability transformation is something that is urgently needed, but it's still pretty much pie in the sky. So, and how it becomes really interesting is that I believe that the digital transformation opens up windows of opportunity for the sustainability transformation. As well as digitalization takes place, we definitely will form it in some manner, and we need to form it sustainably. So when it comes to the topic of the talk, economics and sustainability, I just want to point out here that this is a very broad set of topics. So we could talk about platformization, so the increasing importance of platforms, be it in mobility, be it in commerce, in online commerce, etc. We can talk about labor productivity increases due to digitalization. There was a big debate starting around 2013 on whether a lot of jobs will disappear due to digitalization and whether we will see immense unemployment, or whether it will lead to a new phase of economic growth, which might be problematic from a sustainability point of view. The topic of economics and sustainability within the question of ICT and digitalization also touches upon the quality of work in the digital economy, click working, etc. There's a lot of debate on winners and losers that is related to the unemployment question, but also regarding firms. Are there firms that are using ICT better or faster or more intelligent, and that will win the race? Between countries is kind of all the profits are being made in the Silicon Valley and in China maybe, and there's a big debate in Europe whether we lag behind. Then the skilled versus unskilled labor discussion has taken place. So whether we will see, and actually we see it to some extent, that low skilled labor, so people who have spent less time in education, will lose their jobs, whilst highly skilled laborers, in particular with skills like engineering, but also IT, etc., they are being demanded by the firms, and therefore their wages increase. And then when we come to this, so this is mostly economic and social aspects, and when we come to the environmental side, there's of course the question of resource use, how much resources are being used in all the devices that are needed for digitalization. Where are they being disposed? Are they being disposed in countries of the global south, mostly under very bad environmental conditions? The question of biodiversity, can digitalization maybe be used to increase biodiversity? There's a big debate in particular in agricultural, in the application of digitalization in agriculture. And then regarding energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. So there the debate is, and we'll come back to that in a sec, whether digitalization increases or decreases energy use and thereby also greenhouse gas emissions. So this is just to give you a picture of how broad the topic could be, and I am not able to cover all of that. So what I'm going to focus on, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, is on the last part only, energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. And I connect it to the second one, labor productivity of economic growth. And the central question coming out of this is, that is the leading question of my talk, is what is the relation of digitalization with energy consumption and CO2 emissions, but in relation to economic growth. And that is because I connect the topic of digitalization of ICT with the broader macroeconomic discussions that we have elsewhere on green growth, post-growth, degrowth. And this discussion on green growth, post-growth, degrowth centers around a question that is whether we will be able to have economic growth while at the same time reduce resource use or in energy use or CO2 emissions sufficiently from an environmental perspective. To put it differently, I just said whether it's possible to decouple. A different perspective that I now prefer is to say the transformation that we need, the economic transformation that we need for sustainability. You know, we have concepts in agriculture, in energy, in mobility, in all sectors of the economy, in industry. The changes that we need, will they lead to economic growth or not? But when it comes to the decoupling debate, here you see three different types of decoupling. So you see economic activity goes up. So that's economic growth measured in GDP, the economic activity. And then we have three different types of decoupling. We have relative decoupling. That means that the amount of resources in this instance, but you could also say of CO2 emissions, that are being used per unit of economic activity, they decrease. But as economic activity is increasing so fast, exponentially, resource use is still increasing. Then we have absolute decoupling. That means that despite economic growth, there is actually a reduction, an absolute reduction of resource use. And then we have sufficient absolute decoupling. That means that the reduction of resource use is sufficient to achieve a certain environmental goal. So when you take the Paris Agreement, the Paris Climate Agreement, this would be, is the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions sufficient to stay within 1.5 degrees? And when you turn the question around, as I just said before, the question would be, when we do the necessary step to achieve the sufficient absolute decoupling, will the economy actually still grow? So will this this line of economic activity be above the horizontal zero line? Okay, coming back to the question, and the question now is, of course, does digitalization help to achieve the sufficient absolute decoupling and to achieve economic growth at the same time or not? And when you look at the literature, at the empirical relationships, and now I focus on energy and CO2 emissions, the two are very much related. This is why I discuss them at the same time. You see that for energy consumption, the empirical literature is actually quite clear, quite anonymous, quite, well, everybody finds the same thing. That is that there's a positive relationship, and causality is always difficult, but as far as it is being attempted, there's a positive effect, a statistically positive one, of digitalization on energy consumption. So more digitalization within a country, this is on a country level, leads to more energy consumption. And for CO2 emissions, you find the same thing, that countries that digitalize faster also have higher CO2 emissions. And this tries to sorry. Sorry, this tries to control for everything else. So it tries to control, or it controls for economic growth. It controls for the composition of the economy, whether there's a lot of agriculture or industrial production in the economy. So this is ceteris paribus, you say in economics. So really the effect of digitalization on CO2 emissions. But, and here it becomes interesting, there's a negative relationship when energy consumption is controlled for. And this means that digitalization might increase energy consumption. And this is really the path how it increases CO2 emissions. And when you take that out, it decreases CO2 emissions. In other words, the important transfer mechanism from digitalization to CO2 emissions is exactly energy consumption. And this is why we focused in a paper, and this is now mostly, or the core is one paper that I published about a year ago in the Journal Ecological Economics, if you want to read it, on digitalization and energy consumption. And there we point out 4 effects how the application of ICT increases energy consumption. So the first one are direct effects, and I'm pretty sure that we have covered that in the last days. I hope so. And this is the energy consumption by the ICT sector itself. And what we see, what the hypothesis was that we went into the analysis is that it declines. So the direct effects are the energy consumption that is needed to produce all the devices that we have, to use them and to dispose of them. And because energy efficiency in these devices, and you're probably also aware of this, so energy efficiency, this is related to Kumi's law, has been increasing rapidly. One should think that that the energy consumption also declines. The second hypothesis was that with which we entered the analysis, that energy and efficiency improvements throughout the economy. So not within the ICT sector, but within agriculture, the energy system, mobility, industrial production, housing, that their ICT is being used to increase energy efficiency and thereby reduces energy consumption. The third hypothesis is that digitalization increases economic growth because it's what I said before, mostly because it increases labor productivity and thereby increases energy consumption, because more economic activity means more energy consumption. And the fourth one is that digitalization goes along with a tertiarization, a sectoral change away from industrial production towards services. You read that in a lot of policy related articles, and thereby reduces energy consumption because services are less energy intensive than industrial production in particular. So what we did then, and I will keep that short, but maybe to also give you an idea how such research works, we related these four effects to a framework from economics that says that the energy consumption in an economy can be attributed to three aspects. That is A, the energy intensity of a specific sector, S, the share of the sector of the whole economy, and Y, the size of the economy. So what one basically says is we take the energy consumption of all sectors and add them up, and within each sector it depends on the energy intensity and the size of the sector. What I then did was to extend the framework for the purpose of analyzing digitalization's role. I took the ICT sector out. So this is what you see here, A ICT times Y ICT. I keep this short and I derivate it to time. And then you get this nice formula, which relates directly to the four effects that I just talked about. So it shows that also from an analytical point of view, it makes very much sense to discuss direct effects, efficiency, growth and output, and sectoral change. This maybe as a short excursion how such research takes place. What we then did, so I did this in cooperation with my colleagues Johanna Pohl and Tilman Santarius. What we then did is we looked at the existing empirical literature on these four effects. And what we found was, regarding the direct effects, that actually overall energy consumption has increased. So that's opposite to the hypothesis. And the explanation is twofold. The first is that we had a lot of energy efficiency increases. This is why we expected decline. But what actually takes place is that the ICT sector has been growing immensely, but even that is not the whole explanation. An additional explanation is that many digital business models are based on free services. So when you look at Facebook, when you look at Google, you see that they earn their money via using the data and advertisements and not selling a product. So you basically don't see in the ICT, in the monetary numbers on the ICT sector, you don't see all the activity because a lot of the services are free. So basically the growth is bigger than can be seen in the GDP numbers regarding ICT, the ICT sector. The second one, efficiency. There the hypothesis was that efficiency increases throughout the rest of the economy. And while that has been true for most examples, so here it's really difficult to have a macroeconomic analysis due to data issues. The data is basically not there on energy efficiency, but when you look at all the examples, they are mostly positive. but also sometimes mixed. So for example, when you look at delivery services, sometimes it is more energy efficient to order something online than to go to a store to buy it. But sometimes also not, and it very much depends on the circumstances. So how full is the transport vehicle that brings the packet to your home, and how far would you have driven with your car. So it very much depends, and this is because often different types of business models are involved. So it's not that ICT is always just used to make something more efficient. So in industry, that might be the case, that you use ICT to make the robot more efficient, that works that is being used in a factory. But actually, totally different business models are being pursued. So the delivery thing is, before you had a store and you ran a store, and now you have a website and a delivery service, and it's a totally different service, and maybe the new one is just more energy intensive. All right. The fourth one, growth in output. Here you see that it is true that digital innovations, digitalization increase output growth. Again, ceteris paribus. So you try to control for everything, and then you look at the countries that have more digitalization and they have more economic growth. But the effect is quite small. And what we see at the same time is that economic growth is quite small in mature economies, so in higher income economies. And this is what we focused on in the analysis. And the explanation is that while digital innovations do increase labor productivity, they do so less than former so-called general purpose technologies. So there are technologies that are regarded as very fundamental, that change a lot of things. Electricity is an example. The combustion engine was an example, and digitalization is again an example. And the explanation is that it increases labor productivity actually less than former of such general purpose technologies. The fourth one, sectoral change. We see that there are more services, but not necessarily less industrial production or agriculture. So the services don't really substitute, they come on top. And this is why the effect of sectoral change itself actually decreases energy consumption, because the share of services increases, but you have to see it in the relation to growth and output. So basically, the additional services lead to the growth and output. Summarizing these results, what we find is that there are 4 effects of digitalization, of digital innovations on energy consumption, 2 positive and 2 negative ones, or 2 that reduce energy consumption and 2 that increase energy consumption. And the direct effects and the growth and output that increase energy consumption are stronger than the other 2, than energy efficiency increases and sectoral change. And at the bottom, you see that again in the equation, but the interpretation is the same. What does that mean for policy? And I'm now going to point out some more general policies, and then I come to more of a perspective how it could be different. So regarding the direct effects, they can be reduced either by increasing efficiency, which is already being done, increasing energy efficiency of the production of devices, but also in the use of devices. But also, and this would be additional to and actually decrease the energy consumption by sufficiency. So for example, to make the devices live longer, or to have data saving code, so that the energy use of servers in particular would be less. Regarding efficiency, the analysis is that a lot of the potentials to increase efficiency are actually not being used, and we would have to use them. We need to use them, in particular by initiating other digital business models. And I come back to that in a second, how that can be done or what framework we need for that. The third one, output growth, would be that we need to use digital possibilities, I would say, the possibilities that go along with digital tools to increase resource use rather than labor productivity. And in the sectoral change, we need to make sure that the digital services actually substitute physical goods. So how do we achieve all this? These are more paths. It's not really policy. And here comes the important policy implication. For all of these changes, in particular the last three, efficiency, output growth, and sectoral change, it's very much important to increase environmental prices, so to increase the price of CO2 emissions. Because when we have a lot higher prices of CO2 emissions and other regulations that make sure that biodiversity is being saved, all of these paths regarding efficiency, output growth, and sectoral change would take place. So it becomes profitable for firms to introduce environmentally friendly digital business models when CO2 emissions are very expensive. So, for example, delivery becomes more expensive. There is an incentive to find ways to have the transport vehicle full and not half empty. Regarding output growth, there's the incentive to introduce digital technologies, let's say in agriculture, that don't increase labor productivity, that people do not have to sit in tractors anymore, but instead that focus on increasing resource productivity, so reducing pesticides, etc. And now comes an interesting point from my perspective, and that is that, of course, to increase the environmental prices is kind of nothing new. It's really a central claim that we know from the overall sustainability transformation. For me, as an economist, I would say it's the central claim. Other scientists from other disciplines would maybe disagree, but certainly all would say it is a central claim for the sustainability transformation. And this is why I come to a preliminary conclusion that we need to turn the idea upside down and put it on its feet. So far, I have the impression that digitalization, ICT, digital innovations, it's often being discussed that we use these technologies for sustainability transformation. I think the better perspective, the better framework is that we need to initiate the sustainability transformation in order to facilitate other types of digital innovations. So we need to initiate transformations in all economic sectors. I pointed them out already: energy system, mobility, agriculture, industrial production. We have concepts from sustainability research for all of these sectors. It's all there. And we need to initiate these transformations, and then digital tools can start to play a different role. Let me just give one example: mobility. We don't just need digitalization there, because then it may be used to have a lot of driverless cars. Instead, we need a holistic transformation there, away from cars, maybe some electric cars, but then a lot of public transport. And then within this, digitalization can play a role. We can have cool apps that tell me how to get from where to where with a train and a bike, and I just have to click and pay it all at once. So there's a role for digitalization, but the transformation is bigger, and digitalization can only reap its potentials in the framework of this bigger transformation. what I want to do next is point out more of a positive perspective, and I will keep that short because I think I'm already over my time. So what we did in a book that I wrote with my colleague Tilman Santarius, it's called Smart Green World. We pointed out guiding principles for sustainable digitalization. And we have 3 guiding principles: digital sufficiency, strict data protection, and focus on common good. And then again, sub-principles. And I want to focus on digital sufficiency here because it mostly relates to what I said before. And within digital sufficiency, we have 4 pillars. That is technical sufficiency, data sufficiency, user sufficiency, and economic sufficiency. And I'll just point them out very shortly. So the technical sufficiency, we sometimes call it hardware sufficiency. The idea is that digital devices and software are designed in a manner that they last longer. So I already touched upon that, and that they can be extended and tinkered with, so they can be changed and thereby last longer. Regarding data sufficiency, the concept is that, so this is the software side, that software is being programmed in a manner that data traffic is lower, and also that privacy is being respected, but in particular that the server capacity is not needed as much as it is today, and in particular that it does not increase as much as might take place if developments unfold as they seem to likely to unfold in the future. User sufficiency goes away from the ICT sector itself and says, okay, we need to apply digital tools to promote sustainable lifestyles, and with this I also mean sufficient lifestyles, so to have less transport, to have an energy system that is decentralized, and thereby have a lot of people who are maybe prosumers, so-called, who have solar panels, etc., on their roof, and thereby decrease energy consumption and material throughput. And the last one is economic sufficiency. So that goes at the macro level. And here we argue that we apply digitalization, ICTs, to facilitate the transition to decentralized, democratic, and probably post-growth economic structures. And again, how does this take place? This one in particular, we would need to not only change something within the digitalization itself or within the regulative framework for digitalization, but this has to be part of a broader socio-ecological transformation. All right. Maybe one last comment on the digital sufficiency. We will publish shortly a paper on that. So if you're interested in that, you can read that up. And also, many of the aspects I talked about are part of the book Smart Green World, if you're interested. And apart from that, I hope you have a fruitful discussion. And I'm not so happy that we are not there all and get to know each other. That would have been nice, but I hope you have a good discussion nonetheless. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.